We begin the day with a deadly crackdown in Kazakhstan that is looking more and more like a major strategic victory for the Kremlin. Tonight, Russian soldiers are in the Central Asian Republic, allegedly there as peacekeepers. Now, they were invited this week after protests over high gas prices, low wages, and government corruption turned violent, with Kazakhstan's president authorizing police to shoot without warning. In the largest city, Almaty, demonstrators set the city hall on fire and seized the airport. Dozens of anti-government protesters have died. Hundreds more are injured. Police say that 13 officers were killed in what has quickly become the biggest crisis in Kazakhstan since it gained independence 30 years ago. Today, the government said, for the most part, order has been restored. Now, President Tokayev is blaming the unrest on what he calls bandits, terrorists, and militants.
Terrorists continue to damage state and private property and use weapons on citizens. I have ordered law enforcement agencies and the army to shoot to kill without warning. We are dealing with armed and trained bandits, both local and foreign. I repeat, they are bandits and terrorists. Therefore, they need to be destroyed. And this will be done shortly. I would like to express my special gratitude to President Vladimir Putin of Russia. He reacted very promptly and, most importantly, in a friendly manner to my appeal.
Well, for years, Kazakhstan has been walking a geopolitical tightrope between the East, the West, and Russia. Kazakhstan's location makes it a bridge between those fast-growing markets of China and South Asia, as well as Russia and Europe. As a major oil and gas exporter, Kazakhstan has enjoyed strong economic ties with the United States and the European Union. Could that now be in jeopardy with the Russian troops in the country? Is Kazakhstan now beholden to the Kremlin? Well, my first guest tonight is Ben Aris. He's a longtime correspondent in Moscow and founder of the media company BNE IntelliNews. He joins me tonight from right here in Berlin. Ben, it's good to have you on the program. Let me ask you, has this equation, has it changed? Is Kazakhstan now forever in debt to the Kremlin for coming to the rescue this week?
Yes and no. To take you through, it's been an extraordinary week. The events in Kazakhstan are unfolded at an unprecedented rate. The whole thing came out of nowhere at the weekend last week when there were protests in the western regions over these price hikes of fuel for cars. But that spread to the rest of the country by Tuesday. And then the government quickly came in and addressed the economic demands of the protesters and reintroduced price subsidies. But that didn't work. By Wednesday, the protests morphed into a sort of general anti-government movement. And at that point, then Tokayev, the president, upped the stakes, and he went from calling the protesters demonstrators to calling them hooligans, and said that what they were doing is illegal. And he took the riot troops, went out to the streets and tried to take the situation back in control. But by the end of Wednesday, it was clear that the government was losing control. And that was the point that they turned to Russia, or rather to the CSTO, this joint cooperation security organization that they set up, the sort of Eurasian equivalent of NATO, and asked for help, at which point the Russians agreed to send, along with the other four members, agreed to send troops, which are arriving this morning. And what we're seeing now is with the arrival of the troops, the situation has changed again. The government seems to be back in control. Mm-hmm. But now there's the follow-through, the cleanup operation, where they're cracking down, where they've ordered shoot to kill in order to bring the protests to a quick end.
And let me ask you, as far as Vladimir Putin is concerned, do you think we know that he can be an opportunist. Is he seizing on the unrest and sending his troops in to expand his influence in this country?
No, it's more to do with the last thing the Kremlin wants to see is yet another color revolution. There was one a year ago in Kyrgyzstan next door, where the alliances, the friends, you have to understand that Russia is deeply invested into Kazakhstan, that it has business ties with it. The Russian companies are invested in there in oil business. The pipelines run out of Kazakhstan through Russia, which earns money from that and buys the oil. And so, all said and done, Putin does not want to see another color revolution, a sort of democratic government put in here. And Tokayev is a partner, a long-time partner, and that his concern is to rescue Tokayev, to keep stability, to keep the relations they already have, rather than territorial expansion. And nor will they leave troops there, I think, once the order is restored.
Now, you've said, the events happened so quickly this week. Do you think all of this caught both, the U.S., NATO, as well as Russia off guard? I mean, it seems, you named Kyrgyzstan. There's also been Ukraine. There's been Belarus. It seems they have been sucking all of the oxygen for the past months.
Yeah, I mean, it caught everybody by surprise. I mean, this came out of nowhere. I mean, the marches, the protests that we saw in Almaty on Tuesday are unprecedented, tens of thousands of people. And there's been low-level protests been going on for years, particularly when the old president Nazarbayev left and Tokayev took over in 2019, there were protests. But they're quickly smothered and the people are arrested and given administrative 15 days in jail and let out again. But this is off the scale, and it came from nowhere. And so everybody scrambled in order to try and catch up, particularly the government trying to regain control. And the Kremlin, when asked, acted very quickly because, likewise, they don't want to see another, after Ukraine, particularly after Belarus, which is a huge pain in the neck for Russia. They don't want to see another long, protracted demonstration, pro-democracy demonstration again.
Journalist Ben Ars giving us valuable context of the situation in Kazakhstan tonight. Ben, we appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, NATO leaders met today to discuss the situation, as we were discussing, on Ukraine's border with Russia, where Moscow is massing thousands of troops. Officials in capitals from Washington to Berlin and Kiev fear that Russian President Vladimir Putin could be preparing an invasion. After Ukraine, Kazakhstan joins the list of countries where Putin is trying to flex his military muscles. Earlier today, our Brussels correspondent Terry Schultz tried to pick the brains of NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. She asked him how he thinks Russia's intervention in Kazakhstan fits into the geopolitical puzzle that Putin is piecing together in the Kremlin. Here's what he said.
I will not speculate on in what way the developments in Kazakhstan will impact calculations by or in Moscow. I think the main message on Kazakhstan is that violence must stop. We have seen the loss of lives, and human rights must be respected, and that also includes freedom of expression and peaceful demonstration.
All right, and my colleague now, Terry Schultz, she is in Brussels. Terry, it's good to have you on the show again, and Happy New Year to you. Let me ask you, Stoltenberg is refusing to stick his head out of the window, it seems, with his answer. Is there a Kazakh connection here?
I wasn't really surprised, Brent, that Stoltenberg wouldn't take the bait on offering me some free analysis there at his press conference, because there really isn't a direct connection between NATO and Kazakhstan. I would say there's sort of a cordial relationship, but nothing too involved. And so NATO really won't want to be getting involved in commenting on Kazakhstan. I think what everyone's looking at now is what this will do to the Kremlin's behavior, whether President Putin will be distracted now by what's happening in Kazakhstan, a country that has always been quite stable and following a positive line toward Russia, whether this will distract him from what he's doing in Ukraine. And then that, of course, could have an impact on NATO.
And did you get the impression, though, that NATO was maybe called off guard by what has happened so quickly in Kazakhstan?
I think certainly, as Ben Aris explained, everyone was caught off guard by how quickly the developments in Kazakhstan occurred. Anyone who's looked at this country or countries in this region knows that there is a lot of resentment building up for decades among some segments of the population. So it's not surprising that the resentment was there, but that it gained so much power in such a short time, I think did take everyone by surprise, and probably President Putin as well. And again, that's what everyone wants to know. What will President Putin do? Will he devote more of his resources to helping settle the ground in Kazakhstan? And what will that mean for his continuing buildup on the border with Ukraine?
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, today's meeting was called to discuss the situation with Ukraine. Here's a little bit more of what the NATO Secretary-General had to say.
NATO will engage in dialogue with Russia in good faith and on substance. But we must also be prepared for the possibility that diplomacy will fail. So today, ministers stressed that any further aggression against Ukraine would have significant consequences and carry a heavy price for Russia.
Now, Terry, if I'm hearing that right, there seems to be some doubt coming from Stoltenberg that this crisis can be solved through diplomacy. Is he preparing the ground for a possible failure?
Have been some developments in recent days, most notably the plan for U.S. and Russia, the U.S. and Russia to have their meeting on Monday, and then for Russia to actually come to NATO for discussions next Wednesday. That's a big deal because NATO's been asking for these consultations for more than 18 months, and Russia has always refused. Now it will come to the table with Ukraine as the central topic for those talks. But certainly no one believes that diplomacy is going to have an easy path, and NATO's military planners were given orders back in December formally to start preparing military scenarios for the possibility that Russia does go ahead militarily and makes further inroads into Ukraine or certainly threatens NATO allies. And Brent, tonight there's also a development, a report coming out of the United States, NBC News, we must give credit there, that says the U.S. may be considering offering to Russia as part of its hopes for reciprocity on backing down on the border with Ukraine, that U.S. troops may be reduced in Europe. And that's something that I've already been speaking with people about. That is certainly not coming as any reassuring sign to European allies here.
Yeah, that is a new development to any talk about reducing the numbers of U.S. troops in Europe. Let's stick with the topic of the number of troops and the Russian buildup along its border with Ukraine. We know that this buildup continues. So tonight, based on what you're reporting, how real then is the danger of a Russian invasion?
I think that the possibility of a Russian invasion hasn't changed so much, but the capability to do so continues to grow. Tonight, Secretary-General Stoltenberg and other officials I spoke to off the record today said that it very definitely continues, that Russia has not paused. Despite moves toward diplomatic discussion with the U.S. and with NATO, it has continued to build up in a significant way its capabilities for an invasion should President Putin decide to do so. At the same time, everyone says they really don't know if those are the Kremlin's plans. Yeah, and if it is true that the U.S. is talking about reducing its troop numbers in Europe, that will, of course, catch NATO leaders completely off guard, blindside. That's not going to help unity within NATO. DW's Terry Schultz with the latest tonight in Brussels. As always, Terry, thank you.